On January 3rd, 2026, the world watched as United States Special Forces descended on Caracas. You saw the footage. You saw the helicopters over the presidential palace. You heard the president announce that democracy has returned to Venezuela and that the Cartel of the Suns had been dismantled. Every news channel, from CNN to Fox, repeated the same story. This was a raid to stop drugs. This was a raid to capture Nicolas Maduro. They are lying to you. If this was a drug raid, why did the U.S. Navy's 4th Fleet secure a shipping lane 300 miles away from the nearest drug port? If this was about democracy, why were the first boots on the ground not at the Capitol building, but dropped into 3 specific, uninhabited sectors of the Amazon jungle? And if this was about Maduro, why is Beijing currently holding emergency military drills that simulate a full-scale naval blockade of the United States? The operation in Venezuela wasn't a police action. It wasn't a liberation. It was a heist. The United States just pulled off the biggest resource robbery in human history, right under China's nose. We didn't go there for the oil. We didn't go there for the cocaine. We went there for the one thing that will decide who survives the next 10 years. And now that we have it, the real war is about to begin. To understand what just happened, you have to ignore what the politicians are saying and look at the map. 12 hours before the main force entered Caracas, a smaller, highly classified unit from the JSOC command was inserted into the Bolivar state, deep in the southern jungle. This area is known as the Orinoco Mining Arc. Officially, this region is a protected rainforest. But for the last 5 years, satellites have been picking up heat signatures that shouldn't exist. Massive excavation projects, roads being built in the middle of nowhere that lead to nothing, high-voltage power lines running into the canopy. The mainstream media told you Venezuela was a failed state. They told you the economy had collapsed and the lights were out. But deep in that jungle, the lights were very much on. For the last decade, while the U.S. was focused on the Middle East and Eastern Europe, Nicolas Maduro was signing secret leases with foreign contractors. But these weren't standard oil contracts. These were sovereignty waivers. Essentially, he sold pieces of his country to pay his debts. And the buyer wasn't a corporation. It was the People's Republic of China. When U.S. forces landed in those jungle sectors last week, they didn't find drug labs. They found state-of-the-art mining infrastructure. They found dormitories with Mandarin signage. They found a multi-billion-dollar operation that had been extracting millions of tons of earth and shipping it quietly out of the Atlantic. The question is, what were they digging for? For years, we've been told that oil is the lifeblood of the economy, that wars are fought for black gold. That is 20th century thinking. In 2026, oil is just fuel. The real currency of power, the stuff that makes hypersonic missiles fly, that powers the AI grid, that runs the guidance systems of the F-35, is rare earth elements. China has a monopoly on this. They control 90% of the world's processing capacity. They have the U.S. military in a chokehold. If Xi Jinping wanted to, he could stop exporting these minerals tomorrow, and the U.S. military-industrial complex would grind to a halt in 6 months. We wouldn't be able to build a single new fighter jet. The Pentagon has known this for years. It has been their nightmare scenario. Decoupling from China is impossible if you need their rocks to build your guns. So, the U.S. intelligence agencies started looking for a backup source, a deposit large enough to break China's monopoly. They found it in Venezuela. Geologists have suspected for a long time that the Orinoco Arc held more than just gold. Recent surveys confirmed it contains one of the largest untapped deposits of coltan and lithium on the planet. But there is something else down there. Something much more dangerous. Something that justifies a sudden, violent invasion, disguised as a drug raid. Reports are leaking from independent journalists on the ground in Bolivar State. They are talking about thorium. If you don't know what thorium is, you need to pay attention. It is a nuclear fuel, safer than uranium, more abundant, and far more efficient. But more importantly, it is the key ingredient for the next generation of directed energy weapons and satellite power systems. China has been betting the farm on thorium reactors. They are building them in the Gobi Desert right now. They want to be the first energy-independent superpower, and they found a massive supply of it in America's backyard. Think about the strategic picture. China was secretly extracting the fuel of the future from a country just 1,500 miles from Florida. They were building a strategic reserve that would allow them to dominate the energy sector for the next century. They were effectively stealing the future right from under the Monroe Doctrine. The United States couldn't let that happen. The raid on January 3rd wasn't about getting bad guys. It was an eviction notice. When those U.S. paratroopers secured the mines, they weren't just seizing territory. They were seizing the supply chain. They cut the cord on China's Project 2026. This is why the reaction from Beijing has been so unusually aggressive. They aren't mad about the violation of international law. They are mad because they just lost their investment. They lost the checkmate they had been setting up for 10 years. So, where does this leave us? The United States has secured the assets. The drug lords are being paraded on TV to keep the public happy. The stock market is rallying because everyone thinks cheap oil is coming back. But the reality is much darker. We have just crossed a massive red line. You have to look at this from the perspective of the East. To Russia and China, this wasn't a liberation. It was an act of aggression. The U.S. military just walked into a sovereign nation and seized assets belonging to Chinese state-owned enterprises. In the world of geopolitics, this is a declaration of economic war. We are already seeing the first signs of retaliation, but not where you'd expect. We aren't seeing Chinese troops landing in South America. That would be suicide. Instead, we are seeing the silent war escalate. 2 days ago, a massive cyber outage hit 3 major U.S. logistics hubs. The news called it a glitch. It wasn't a glitch. It was a warning shot. It was a reminder that while we can take their minds, they can turn off our lights. This is the new warfare. It's not about taking land. It's about causing pain. And China has a lot of levers it can pull. There is a terrifying theory circulating in intelligence circles right now. It's called the geopolitical trade. The theory goes like this. The U.S. knows it cannot fight a war in the Pacific and occupy Venezuela at the same time. Our military is stretched too thin. Recruitment is at an all-time low. We simply do not have the bodies. By committing nearly 50,000 troops to secure Venezuela and stabilize the region, the Pentagon has pulled significant resources away from the Pacific theater. We have exposed our flank. Did we just unintentionally give China the green light to move on Taiwan? Think about the calculus. Xi Jinping has lost his resource hub in the West. He needs a win. He needs to secure his own chip supply, the TSMC factories in Taiwan, to ensure China's survival. He might look at the U.S. bogged down in the jungles of South America, dealing with an insurgency, dealing with a broken Venezuelan economy, and decide that now is the moment to strike. We might have traded an island in the Pacific for a jungle in South America. And if that happens, the global economy collapses overnight. So what does this mean for you? Sitting at home, watching this on your phone? It means the era of stability is officially over. The resource wars are no longer a prediction for the future. They are the reality of today. The seizure of Venezuela will likely lead to a short-term drop in gas prices, a psychological trick to make you feel like things are getting better. Do not fall for it. The long-term consequence is the fracturing of the global trade system. We are moving into a world of blocks, the West versus the East. If China decides to retaliate economically, we could see immediate shortages in pharmaceuticals, electronics, and consumer goods. And if the conflict turns hot, if the silent war becomes a shooting war over Taiwan or the Strait of Hormuz, then we are looking at a return to history. We are looking at a draft. We are looking at rationing. We are looking at a level of sacrifice that no one in the modern generation is prepared for. The citizen celebrates the victory on the news. The survivor looks at the supply chain. The survivor sees that the board has just been reset, and the pieces are moving into dangerous positions. The raid on Venezuela was a tactical victory for the United States, but it was a strategic escalation for the world. We poked the dragon, we took its treasure, and now we are waiting for the fire. Don't be distracted by the headlines about drug cartels. Watch the shipping lanes. Watch the cyber attacks. Watch the rhetoric coming out of Beijing. The war has changed. The battlefield isn't a trench in Europe anymore. It's the supply chain that keeps your world running. We secured the lithium. We secured the thorium. But the cost of that victory hasn't been paid yet. And when the bill comes due, it's going to be paid by us. Stay sharp. Stay prepared. I'll see you in the next one.